What is up? Welcome to Etsy Jam, episode 83. Do you have an A listing in Marmalade and still aren't seeing more sales? Are you wondering what's up with Etsy's latest changes? Do you wonder how long it takes to see results after making changes to your listings? Lisa from Marmalade joins us today to answer these pressing questions and more. Stick around and get to know Lisa a bit better and hear the top 5 questions Etsy sellers ask about Etsy and Marmalade. What is up? Welcome to Etsy Jam, the show where we have scintillating conversations about serious topics. I am Gordon from Marmalade.
And I am Richie from Marmalade. And if you have an Etsy shop you are serious about but don't yet have Marmalade, you gotta come check it out, because Marmalade gets your products found with real shopper keywords. Need to know how to find Marmalade? Check us out at marmalade.com, which is marmaled.com.
We have a very special guest with us today. We have our very own Lisa joining us today. Thank you so much for joining us, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, yeah. So you guys probably know Lisa if you've emailed success@marmalade.com before, if you have been on any of our onboarding webinars before, if you are active in any of our groups that we have online, if you've read any of our wittily worded feature update emails, or our wittily worded Pinterest pins. I don't know if wittily is a word, but it should be. Lisa does a bunch of stuff with us, so you're probably familiar with her in some way or form, but you probably haven't seen her on video yet. So here you go. Here she is. Welcome, Lisa.
To be fair, I've hardly ever seen me on video, so new. I'm generally safely secured behind the screen and not in front of the camera.
Well, we've got a fun treat today. Lisa's going to go through and talk about the top 5 questions that people ask through our Marmalade channels. And so we're going to kind of cover those and give you some answers to those questions. But before we get into that, why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself, Lisa? Like, where'd you grow up and how did you get to this point where you're involved with these crazy people?
I grew up kind of all over the place. I was born in Chattanooga, Tennessee, so I guess it's fair to say that I'm a Southern girl. And then from there, we moved around a lot. I've lived in Illinois, so North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, went to high school in Virginia, went to a boarding school there because I play the cello and they had an orchestra there. So enjoyed that overall. Still play the cello. Then went to college in Asheville, UNC Asheville. You guys aren't familiar with Asheville. You should get familiar with Asheville. It's pretty phenomenal. And then I ended up going to graduate school at NC State in Raleigh, North Carolina. My undergrad degree is in psychology. And my graduate degree is in social work. I think a lot of people think of social work as like DSS and Department of Health and Human Services, that sort of thing. And really, my program was much more geared toward nonprofit administration and just sort of working with nonprofits and doing some advocacy work and things like that. So I really did not get my hands on the side of social work that most people have associated with that definition. So how I got involved with Richie and Gordon and Marmalade is once I graduated with my master's degree, I found in that process that I had actually kind of a passion for small business. Some of the organizations that I was most interested in graduate school were organizations that were setting up businesses in developing countries for folks who did not have opportunities to start businesses or own businesses. So sort of working with some different nonprofits around that and just had interest in that direction. So that was almost micro business, like learning to start micro businesses for people who really wouldn't have otherwise had an opportunity to develop that sort of thing on their own. And, you know, that's usually nonprofit backed. So that was very much within what I went to school for. And then once I started looking for work outside of graduate school, I actually ended up working for a local chamber of commerce here, which again, was what was putting me in contact with local business, small business. And I just really loved that. And then my roommate and my best friend, Jade, also works for Marmalade. And I think you guys have met her before in a jam. She started working for Marmalade and she came back and she was like, I met these guys. They do this thing. I'm going to be doing this stuff with them. And I was like, you tell them that if they have any openings, I would be more than interested, because it was just right up Etsy and what Etsy does and what you guys are doing for sellers on Etsy. And now what I get to help you guys do for sellers on Etsy is just what I'm passionate about and what I believe in, which is helping small businesses succeed. So it was a long, not necessarily straight path to getting to Marmalade, but I couldn't be happier. I love working with the sellers. I enjoy it. I enjoy even the challenging parts of it. The parts where people are just like, I've tried everything, and really they've tried like 2 things. Like, there are a few more things you could try, but I love it. You know, my education was entirely about working with people. It was about learning what motivates people, what's the catalyst behind changing behavior. So, you know, all that stuff plays into every bit of what we do at Marmalead, is like helping people recognize the most beneficial ways for them to change behavior and create habits that actually like feed into their success, and also like proliferating small businesses. That's what Etsy's all about, right? Is taking these micro businesses and these small businesses and just bringing that back to the forefront again. Because I think we lost that there for a while. I think we were kind of like, when I was a kid, it was all about malls and like big business and corporations. And I spent a little bit of time actually in the corporate world, and I lost my way a little bit. I just sort of lost that passion for business, because I think I saw such a disconnect between the people that were actually, you know, doing the work and working with the people and like that were familiar with the product, and the people that were running the show at the top, who were literally just making decisions about their bottom line. You know, when you see that sort of thing happen, you have like this really guttural realization that that's not sustainable, but that big business is like less concerned about sustainability than they are about making profit in the now. And then if they have to like roll that profit over into something else later, all those lives that get affected and everything, that's like no skin off their nose, really. And it's the total opposite with small business. There's this, again, this guttural understanding and knowledge that everything that they do is about serving and then selling, right? So they're like very service oriented, very people oriented, and that bottom line is connected to the idea of service rather than the idea of this giant structure that you're tweaking from the you know, upper echelons over here. So I learned that I didn't want to work in that environment. And when I got reconnected, sort of nonprofit draws you back down generally to that smaller scale again. And when I did make the decision about graduate school and left the corporate world to go back to school, that was largely the driving force behind that decision. I wanted to be back in a career around business, in a space around business at the very least, that was focused on people again. And then I left the corporate job, and I decided I needed some time to find myself again. Classic millennial term right there. I'm going to go find myself again. So I had thankfully saved up a good chunk of money from working in the corporate world, and took 6 months and traveled to the Philippines and lived very rurally. I lived 12 hours from Manila by about 4 different forms of transportation away from Manila. I was on the island of Mindoro. I landed in Manila, and I took a 3-hour bus ride to a ferry, and then had a 3 to 4 hour ferry ride, and then another 4-hour bus ride or so. And that got me to the bottom of a mountain, where then I needed to get as far up that mountain as I could on a dirt bike. And then once you reach the part of the mountain where you couldn't get up any further on a dirt bike, I met my first water buffalo. I loaded some of my stuff onto a slide that the water buffalo was pulling, and then hiked the rest of the way into the village. And we had to do that hike several times a week, I guess. So it was pretty intense. I lived out there. There's no running water, no electricity. We had a solar panel and a car battery. And so I ended up actually writing my graduate school application off of a solar panel and a car battery with a laptop connected to it. And I almost did not get accepted to graduate school, because I sent my application over a satellite phone. And so the formatting for the application had to be pretty specific. And when they received it, it looked like I couldn't create a Word document effectively. And so they were like, yeah, we're not gonna. And as they were getting ready to reject my application, somebody was reading through my essay, and they were like, wait a second, I think she's writing this from a thatch roofed hut 12 hours outside of Manila off of a car battery. We might want to think, oh, okay. So they decided to accept my application. And then right about the time that I was getting ready to come home, I got my acceptance letter through email in the Philippines. So I basically came home, and within a week I had moved from the Charlotte area to the Raleigh area for graduate school. So yeah, that's the long and twisted journey to Marmalead.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Yeah. We love having you. It's been a great journey. It's been great having you on the team. You've been fantastic. And we did a jam, like you said, we did a jam with Jade, and now we get to have a
Yeah.
jam with you. This is awesome. If you want to dive into the list that we talked about before, the top 5 questions that we get from
Yeah.
Etsy users about either selling on Etsy or Marmalade itself or what have you. So the number one question that, well, not necessarily number one by the
Right.
number of times we get asked it, but
Right.
anyway,
Yeah.
the first of the 5 questions
Yeah.
is I have an A and it still isn't working. Why not? And so this question, a little background for people who might not be familiar, inside of Marmalade, we will grade your listings and we will grade your keywords that you have selected on those listings. And so the person who would be asking this question is referring to the fact that, hey, Marmalade is showing me that I have an A on this listing, but it's still not selling, it's not performing. Why is that?
So I think the most important thing to remember with this is that the grade itself is not taking into account every single part of an all-encompassing SEO strategy, right? It is looking at how well the keywords you have chosen are applied. You know, there are tons of other things that play into how a listing is going to perform. Photos, descriptions, level of competition, all of those are really important factors, and all of those are very much playing into how your listing performs. And so it is theoretically possible to have a grade that's an A that isn't performing well. And it is, again, theoretically possible to have a grade that's a C or even a D that's outperforming a grade that's an A. And that's because maybe that keyword that you're targeting in that C or D listing, like let's say maybe you're only targeting one keyword, right? In that listing, that's going to drag that grade down. Essentially, you're going to be getting a much lower grade than if you were using up all 13 keyword opportunities on that listing. So you'll see a lower grade for that. Maybe you've made a couple other things where you're not following that keyword application strategy to a T, so you've got a lower grade. But that keyword that you are targeting in that listing is just selling really well. Like you're getting found for it, you're targeting it well, you've got it matched exactly in your title. I mean, naturally that listing is probably going to perform okay. While the A listing over there, you've applied the keyword really well, but maybe it was the wrong keyword. Maybe it's a keyword you're not a good fit for. Maybe you're selling a candle and that candle is blueberry scented, and you use the term blueberry for your first keyword because you're like, that's important, it's relevant. But if you type in blueberry, what's going to pop up is probably not going to be a whole bunch of candles. It's probably going to be other stuff, right? And so you may not be a great fit for that keyword. You may need to find something that's a little bit more niche. You will probably need to find something that's a little bit more niche than that. But you could have applied that keyword perfectly and gotten that A grade. And that, I feel, is what confuses people the most, is they're like, I got all my grades up to an A. Why isn't this working? And it's because there are other pieces in the equation that you have to pay attention to. I think that's pretty much what I always go back to with folks, but I'm sure you guys have some stuff to add too.
You're spot on with all the SEO, whatnot, right? And it's almost like that's getting a grade in one subject, but you're taking more than just SEO class, right? So you can pass that, but you can fail in math. You can fail in marketing. You can fail in other things that aren't part of that, but they are part of your overall report card that we're not looking at, like the overall business report card.
Yeah, so I think another thing, people sort of expect competition to be all rolled up into that, but it isn't. It's not in that grade. So you got to be, paying very close attention to the competition level of the words that you're targeting. Because if you're new and you have unproven listings or just underperforming listings and you're targeting keywords, especially at the beginning of your title, that have like 50,000 other listings or more competing for that same keyword, it's essentially like asking a lifeguard to find a kid in a pool of 50,000 people. It's going to be pretty tough. Like, you're just not likely going to get found very efficiently in that kind of a setting. And it's not until, you've got a really strong record of sales on a particular listing that you might have a really good chance of standing out in that kind of a competitive setting. And that's, again, if you've optimized all the other pieces the way that they should be too. There's plenty of opportunity on Etsy. There's lots of opportunity on Etsy, but you definitely have to be optimizing for those pockets of opportunity rather than just like jumping into the deep end with 50,000 other people and being like, yeah, folks are going to find me. You've always got a chance that that's going to happen, but if you're really wanting to optimize, you're going to want to spend some time finding that niche and probably like targeted some words that are actually going to get you to the shoppers that are looking for you versus just that huge pool of everybody.
Yeah, exactly. And you going back to like your blueberry example that you gave a while ago. When a shopper types in the word blueberry, they already have something in their mind that they're looking for. You know, they have an expected result. And
Right.
if your product showing up isn't what they had in mind, like maybe they weren't thinking candles, they were thinking, you know, clothing or home decor or
Yeah.
soap or something like that. And
Yeah.
if they see a candle, they're like, yeah, that's not what I was looking for. It's totally possible to pick killer keywords. Blueberry could be a fantastic keyword,
Yeah.
but if it's not what your shoppers are thinking when they're searching, it's not going to be a high performing keyword for you. And so if you're
Right.
in that situation, you feel like, you know, you've done all the other things, your price is spot on where it should be, your photos are killer, so you're not losing out to other products around you that have better photos, and it really is an issue of your keywords not lining up for you. Something you can do is go into your Etsy stats for, you know, whichever listing you're working on, and Etsy will show you which keywords you're getting traffic for that listing. And so you know that people who have searched that keyword and they've clicked on that specific listing, on your listing, and they're going to visit you for that keyword. So that's a good starting point to start to branch out and say, okay, let's take these keywords, let's bring them into a storm inside of Marmalead, let's start to generate some other ideas that are related to these keywords and see if we can find other ones that would stick for my audience. All right, let's see, question number 2. How do I know that Marmalead is going to be worth it, you know, have a good return on my investment?
So my number one answer for this is always that there's going to be a lot of trial and error in keyword research, right? And any time that you endeavor to research anything, it is always easier with tools than without tools. And we are a set of tools. That's what we are. We're here to help you like best leverage those tools in your interest, in your best interest. But anytime you're like, you know, how do I know there's going to be an ROI on this set of tools? Recently, we've started using this example of an axe, right? You can go to a hardware store and you're going to walk up to the counter with an axe, right? And you're going to ask the guy behind the counter, how do I know that this axe is going to be a good return on investment? And that guy's probably going to look at you a little funny, guy or gal, whatever. And he's going to say, well, if you use it and you swing really hard and really true and you hit the mark, then that axe is probably going to be a great ROI for it's probably going to have a great return on investment for you. If you take that axe home and you just set it down next to your wood pile, it probably will not have much of a return on the investment for you. Like you are going to have to learn how to use the tool. You're going to have to actually use it. You're going to have to interact with it and learn, you know, how to optimize and learn about SEO. And if you already have those skill sets, that's awesome. So you're one step ahead. If you don't, then we're here to make that learning process as smooth and easy as possible. But we're a set of tools. So you can't just buy it and immediately expect that we're going to create a stunning SEO strategy for you. Or that we can fix all your keywords for you. We're a set of tools essentially here to help make sure that research process is as seamless as it possibly can be. So it's definitely worth it, right? Just like an axe would be if you've got a pile of wood that you need to chop, the axe, it makes that process 1,000 times easier. And that's what we do too in terms of keyword research. We make that process 1,000 times easier. But in order to get a return on investment, you do have to jump in there and be kind of a dedicated user. And we are so lucky to have a lot of really dedicated users as a part of our community because we've got folks out there who are just all over helping new people, answering questions, and really helping Marmalead be the excellent return on investment that it is, you know, possible for it to be if you really dive in and are interested in using these tools to their full capability. So that's generally my answer for folks who ask, like, how do I know I'm going to get my money's worth from Marmalead?
I think you nailed it.
This is a good question too, and I think that, you know, as a small business owner, as someone has an online business, this is an important question to ask because there's so many things you can be spending your money on, and so
For sure.
wherever you're allocating your money, you should always be asking this question. You know, if you're taking out Facebook ads, Facebook is showing you what the cost of acquisition is, and you should be checking that against, you know, whether it's working for you. Is this more money that I'm making off of, you know, the lifetime value of one of my customers? Am I making money off of these ads, or am I spending money and I'm really not getting a return on my investment. So I think that's a good question. That's awesome.
I never think it's necessary to push. Every shop has to decide which and what tools are going to be, most helpful and best for them at any given point. Again, it's like, are you ready to step in and make that investment of time into the keyword research process? Are you ready and willing? Is that the place where you're at? So you do have to choose. Every shop has to make that decision, because you're right. There's 1,000 different places you could be putting money into. And I absolutely, I am great with people writing in and asking this question, because I get to ask these questions in return. Like, are you ready to pick up the axe and chop the wood? Is that the point that you're at right now? Because that's what we're going to be for you. And when you're ready, then we're here.
Yeah, it all takes work. And that's what sets it aside, though. I mean, you kind of want it to take work, because otherwise, how do you gain the advantage? If everyone else can just click a button and have everything figured out for them, that is very quickly going to become just a place you can't be.
And you bring up a really interesting point too, because I think I hear that frustration a lot in some of our customers. They're like, I don't understand why this isn't easier. And it is kind of delicate to say you don't want it to be easier, because if it's super easy, then everybody and their uncle is going to be all over it. And then that competition is going to be so vast that you're going to want to move off the platform anyway. So with everything in life, you want to find that balance. And so I think like I said, there's a lot of opportunity on Etsy, but it shouldn't be like the euphemism stealing candy from a baby. It shouldn't be that easy. This is a business. You are running your own business, which is something to be proud of, because it takes a lot of work. It's a commitment. It's not a weekend lemonade stand. It's a business. And that's something that you do have to put a lot of time and effort and energy into maintaining. And I do think that sometimes folks kind of jump onto the Etsy bandwagon not expecting that it's going to be like owning your own business. They sort of just think, oh, I can throw up whatever and people are going to buy it because there's something for everyone. And to a certain extent, there's a piece of that thought process that, there is something for everyone. There is, like, no matter how unique your product is, there is likely people out there that are going to want that product. But you got to find those people. And to find those people, it's a lot easier with a set of tools than without a set of tools. So
yeah, I think it goes back to the first question a little bit too, with regards to, having to put the work in, where the keywords that you're picking, at least from an SEO perspective, the keywords that you're picking, they're not going to be the same as the shop next door to you. Not every single shop on Etsy is selling the same thing, and therefore not every customer on Etsy is buying the same thing. And so it's really situational. It really depends on your specific niche and your niche shoppers who are there looking for that stuff. And you just got to line it up right. And a tool isn't going to be able to tell you, hey, here's all the keywords your audience are using. We can tell you how popular a keyword is on Etsy, and you get a good sense of how many people are searching that and engaging with that keyword. But is it your audience? A tool can't tell you that.
A lot of the time, too, the audience for the product, the whole reason that these are on Etsy is because they're creative. They're not the normal thing that we walk into every store and see sitting right there. You know what a can of Pringles are, right? You know what potato chips are. Like, oh, okay, just about everyone eats potato chips. But a lot of this stuff, if it's creative enough on Etsy, I have no idea. Like, I don't even know what you call it. I don't know what it's for. I don't know, but the market does. The person who would buy this, they know exactly what it is. They know all sorts of stuff about it.
You got to find a way to let people know that even if they weren't looking for you to begin with, they're looking for you now. And that's all about just targeting and finding those folks who are, in some of those wider searches and just sort of drawing them in. Everything you guys have said is spot on for sure. It's about finding your people.
Question number 3. What is going on with Etsy?
Yeah, so broad question. Yeah. So I still get questions for sure. Etsy always is changing, right? It's and they have to. In order to survive in any business, you have to evolve, especially in the e-commerce world. Like, everything seems to happen 10 times faster in the e-commerce world. At least that's been my experience thus far. And so I think Etsy, the evolution that it's going through is going to be constant, and they do the best that they can to keep their people updated on with what's going on. And so my answer for this is that Etsy actually has Etsy's help pages, which are chock full of information on the tests that they're running, how search works, so the things that they're prioritizing, and it just breaks everything down. And again, I'm totally cool when people write in and ask this question, but they kind of come to us to ask what's going on with Etsy, when Etsy really has done a pretty good job of putting out as much information as they can to folks about what's going on with Etsy. And of course, again, it's always about keeping up with things that are relevant to you, right? This is important that you sort of keep up with what's going on with Etsy for the health and well-being of your own shop, and sort of knowing where those resources are. So that when things are changing, we're doing the best we can to keep you updated on changes, of course, but your number one source of information should always be, if you can get it, from the horse's mouth, right? And so if Etsy has got help pages that are outlining changes and tests and everything that's going on, keep up with those. That's information straight from the horse's mouth, and that's just going to be super helpful for you as you're just sort of navigating the changes, which will remain constant because it's Etsy and it's e-commerce. So that's generally my answer to what's going on with Etsy.
Yeah, Etsy does a really good job at keeping that stuff up to date. Like you're saying, Lisa, Etsy needs sellers. Like if there's no sellers, there's no Etsy. So they know this, and they completely rely on you guys, just the same as if you're selling exclusively on Etsy, then you're exclusively relying on Etsy. So anything they put out there is in your best interest to follow that. If there's talk about some big change coming, but they haven't made it yet, don't worry about it. It's not live. It's not going to affect you. You don't need to pre-make changes. You don't need to try to find cheats or hacks to get around kind of the way they have things set up to work on Etsy to get a leg up in certain situations. Your best bet is to follow their rules that they put forward and do exactly what they're suggesting that you do, so that you can kind of move forward together. And if you're following what they're wanting you to do as a seller, that's just going to work well going into the future. If people are trying to find little hacks around things or little, games or glitches to get a leg up on their competition, Etsy is wise to that, and they're going to be working hard to make it so that that doesn't work. They don't want people to be doing that. They want people to be doing what they're suggesting that people do. And so most of the time, by just following that, you're going to be in the best spot that you can.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really good point. It is a very symbiotic relationship, right? Like Etsy lives to have sellers and to make those sales, and so does the seller. So it's basically Etsy isn't doing things that aren't in the best interest of the sellers on their platform, because it wouldn't make sense. It would be essentially aiming a shotgun at their foot, and deciding what day they're going to pull the trigger. It's just not a smart idea on their end to not do things that doesn't benefit that group of sellers. So Etsy isn't doing things in general that are not in the best interest of sellers.
Yeah, same team.
And I think that gets lost a lot. Maybe you guys have some insight into how or why, but Etsy brings a lot to the table for somebody who chooses to sell on this platform. And so somehow I think it gets lost a lot. Like Etsy becomes the bad guy somehow. But like Richie said, it's same team. These people are working for you, and they, if you don't sell, they're not making any money either. It's a very symbiotic relationship. So
it is, and they're not trying to trick you, but they still need people to play by the rules, right? So things like copyright infringement, stuff like that, Disney stuff, and you're not supposed to be. And a report comes into Etsy about it that they are going to take down the listing, possibly your shop. It's one of those things, they need you to follow the rules. When they tell you like, hey, this is how to get found in search, they're not kidding. They're not trying to hide something. They are telling you the truth. They might not be telling you, they're not going to say like, hey, here is how you, can game the system, but that's for your own good too. They don't want people to, kind of break the system and have a bad experience for sellers and shoppers alike. They have a balance, right? They need the seller, they need the shopper. Both of them have to have a good experience for Etsy to exist.
Question number 4. How long does it take to see changes that I've made to my listings?
So going back to our order of questions, question number 4 may perhaps be, I would say, the most asked question out of these 5 questions. People are like, so I've been with you for 4 days now, and I am not seeing any, significant changes in things. It does take time. Sometimes for some people it's an overnight thing, but that's not the norm. Generally speaking, we usually say a couple weeks to 4 weeks to really sort of figure out where things are settling into place in that whole search process. Like I mentioned earlier in one of the earlier questions, there's trial and error involved in research of any kind, and keyword research is no different from that. And time is a part of that process. It would be great if changes happened overnight regularly. Like you get on the latest diet and you're like 2 days in and you're like, yeah, I've only dropped like 0.5 pounds. What's going on, right? It takes time for things to change significantly. And honestly, that's a good thing, right? When changes happen incredibly quickly, sometimes you're not able to see where something is actually going to be stable, right? And so when things change more gradually, usually they tend to be more stable as well. It's also different for every shop. I think that's part of it too. It depends on, if you're selling very high priced items, things above $1,000, those things tend to take more time to sell. And so you'll see changes happening sort of slower in markets that are like that. If you're changing listings that are on the lower end of the pricing spectrum and tend to turn over a lot quicker, you might see changes happening faster in shops like that or with listings that you're changing. But in general, I think we just sort of try to average it out and just help you remember that these things do take time. Again, it's kind of one of those it depends answers, but to give it some time, be patient, because research in any form is going to take time before you sort of figure out where things are going to settle into place. And especially with Etsy, I think, depending on the amount of listings competing for a specific keyword, how long it takes Etsy to cycle through those listings to show everything. That's a piece of it too. And that's dependent again on how many listings there are competing for these different keywords. So there's a lot of different factors that go into that.
Yeah. And don't change everything at once or you're not going to know what you did. You might have done something that would work fantastic if you hadn't changed the other thing that went horrible. So then you're like, I did all this stuff and nothing happened. It's like, well, this was a great change. This was a bad change, but there's no way to like identify that. But yeah, so the other thing is, sometimes the reason people show up is because things have started taking a bad turn. So they're like, I got to do something, right? My sales have slowed down. I'm getting found less in search. I got to do something. Oh, I'm going to go jump on Marmalead. Well, you're doing that while something's already not working. Like something's already changed for you. Normally the story is things were going well. The last couple months, they started going bad. And I think you guys might be a solution. It's like, well, we might be. But you might also have other issues going on that you need to like get a hold of. You can't just be like, well, my sales have declined for the past 3 months. And 3 days into having Marmalead, like I'm just going to be at like 300% of what I did last year. Like that's not likely to happen.
Absolutely.
Because there's still other stuff to figure out.
I think you cannot over exaggerate how fluid things really are, right? And how much, even in a brick and mortar shop, like the only thing constant about a market is the fact that it's constantly changing, right? In e-commerce, that seems to be even a little bit greater of a thing that folks need to remember, is that the language, the way people describe things is just constantly evolving. And it seems to be that e-commerce is sort of at the vanguard or the forefront of that. Like everything evolves a little bit faster in the e-commerce world. And you want to be utilizing those tools along because you want to keep up with that change. You want to be on top of that change. You want to know what's happening with the trends in your market. I kind of think of it as, I don't know if you guys watch these big wave surfers on YouTube. I'm kind of obsessed with watching these guys that surf like 100-foot waves. They're not only paying attention to that one wave that they're surfing. Maybe they are in the moment that they're surfing that wave, but let me tell you, the second they get underneath the curl of that wave, they're thinking about like the next 15, like how am I going to get through the washout and everything else? And then what's the wave set that's coming in afterwards, right? And markets are the same way. You're just constantly one change after the other. You got to be on top of that. And you want to be, it's fine to just surf one wave, but things will change, right? And eventually you're going to have to kick back out and get another swell. You're going to have to surf another wave back in. It's great to ride a wave, and hopefully it's been a really long, successful wave with a very happy ending. But eventually you're going to have to jump back into that research process, and hopefully you've kept up with it along, and you'll just be able to kick back out and grab the next wave.
Question number 5. How often should I renew?
This is one of those other it all depends questions, but we do get it a lot. And I think another thing that maybe I'll have you guys, talk about a little bit more in a second is renewing has kind of shifted what it does a little bit. But essentially what happens when you renew a listing is that you're letting Etsy know, hey, I'm still paying attention to this listing. It's not on the back burner in my shop. I'm still tending to it. And you're getting a bump in what we call recency, right? The idea there is that every time a listing sells, it renews automatically, right? And so Etsy knows that there's movement on that listing. They see it because it's sold. And so you don't have to manually go in there and show Etsy that movement. When you go in and manually renew, you're going in and showing Etsy that movement. You're saying, hey, it's still here. hey, there's still movement on this listing. Hey, still pay attention to this and keep it rotating through and all that jazz. So when it comes to the question of how often you should renew, that is different for every shop, for every listing. So how competitive is the listings environment? Like, are there 50,000 other listings in that listing pile? And if so, you'll need to be more aggressive with that renewal strategy, because there's a ton of other listings in that environment that are also, up for grabs, and also telling Etsy, hey, we've got movement over here. So it's a much more competitive environment. And if you've got an underperforming listing, you'll need to be more aggressive. If you've got a new listing, it's generally okay to be more aggressive with a renewal strategy, because again, you're just kind of flagging that item and saying, hey, this is still here. Still pay attention to it until it sort of finds its regular flow in terms of sale.
I mean, like you said, it's a form of commitment. They cost 20 cents to renew it before it expires, right? So what does that tell Etsy? It says, hey, someone's still here and they're willing to put a little skin in the game. If you think about it, setting up a shop on Etsy is pretty easy, right? In the grand scheme of things, it's pretty easy. It's a heck of a lot easier than finding a brick and mortar location and getting leases and getting equipment and doing all the painting, all this stuff to be here at this location. I mean, you can just take some photos and throw some stuff together. It might not be the most beautiful thing if you just slap it together, but the fact is, like, that's where the bar is. It's low enough that you can just kind of like throw things together, and all of a sudden you have an Etsy shop, and you can put up a listing and you can just ride it out until it expires. And the problem is, some people get, they're expecting a very quick turnaround, and they're expecting that, as soon as they open the shop, like, the floodgates are just going to open and customers are going to be, blowing it off the shelves. But when that doesn't happen, people get burned out and they kind of forget about it. And then, because shopper might buy something from there and then wait and wait, and it never comes because the shop has forgotten that they put it up there because they've moved on, right? Like, that was yesterday's idea. We have moved on to, it's been a month, we've moved on to something else, customer buys the thing, and then they have bad time on Etsy. So I think it makes sense, as to keep a nice pulse going for the shop. Either things are continually selling and customers are having a good experience, or listings are being renewed, and letting everyone know, like, hey, someone's still here, someone's still manning the controls.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just sort of sending that signal to Etsy, like you said, that someone's still there and things are still being tended to, so to speak. In essence, it's going to be different for every shop, but sort of what you want to pay attention to, again, is just, level of competition in the environment that you're in, because in the most competitive environments, things are getting renewed often, added often. So again, in those really competitive environments, being more aggressive isn't a bad thing. And then just keeping in mind that if a listing is selling regularly, it is automatically renewing. So you can probably be less aggressive with a renewal strategy on a listing that is selling regularly. I know that we were talking, Richie, you kind of went into this a second ago, but I did have like a little bonus, not a question so much as a piece of advice. And that was actually, you went into it just a couple minutes ago. And that is to not change everything in your shop at once, right? Change it in chunks. I have this little sentence written down here. Basically, you're building an SEO strategy, not a roller coaster, right? You don't want to.
I like that.
Yeah, you don't want to, send your whole shop on a roller coaster ride. That's stressful for you. It can really hinder you from being able to see the true results of, a particular change that you made to a listing over here. If you've done so many changes, you're just losing what change made what difference where. So really do things in chunks, right? Pick 2 or 3 listings and really work hard on optimizing those. And then if you can, do a little bit of A/B testing, and this doesn't work for everybody, but if you have enough product to do some A/B testing where you can leave one listing alone and then kind of make a copy of it and optimize that second listing and see which one performs better. As long as you have enough product to fill orders, then you can do that, and that's a great way to sort of figure out what changes are really making a difference for you. But at the end of the day. And this is kind of one of those questions that we get that makes me kind of sad, a little bit heartsick, when people write in and they're like, I changed my SEO across my entire shop. It was 400 listings. I spent this much time doing it. And now I just can't even tell what's going on anymore. I don't know. And everything's different. And I want to, I wish that you'd written in a little bit into this process, because you got to change things in chunks. I mean, you don't have to. but it saves you a lot of sort of guesswork and trying to figure things out in the long run. Like what changes were created from what effect, basically. What did I do that made this change and that change? Changing things in chunks is just an important thing to remember, and kind of just a bonus piece of advice for some of the questions that come into us at Success.
Make sure you understand the changes you're making.
Yeah.
Because, if you change 400 listings because you thought you understood it, or you thought you understood what someone said, like you thought someone said, hey, go do this, and you change across 400 listings, and then you find out that that's not what they meant. That's a lot of time.
Yeah.
So
it is. And again, it's kind of a nod to that idea of like doing things to create steady change versus really fast change. It may take a little bit more time to create your SEO strategy that way, but that time, if you think about it, is time sort of better spent. You've got less wasted time in there. So efficiency is key, right? Especially when you're running and owning your own business. Efficiency is absolutely is key. And so however you can spend those hours most efficiently is the direction you want to go. And when you just send your shop on a roller coaster ride, while it may be exciting, it is generally not the most efficient thing in the world.
Yeah, roller coasters usually stop where they start. So
Yeah, that is an excellent point.
They go up and down and all around, but they just come right back to where they started.
Gordon coming in with the genius remark there.
I like the roller coaster thing. I thought I'd lean into it a little. That's good. But hey, Lisa, these are fantastic. Thanks so much for putting these together. These are 5 awesome, great questions and a bonus tip in there too.
You can't not have the bonus, right? The bonus is the most. You leave just 5 tips and you're like, what happened to the bonus? It's kind of like with the extra French fry in your Happy Meal. You're like, yeah, I did.
See, I was thinking like maybe you go to a concert and the band doesn't play an encore and you're like, come on.
Yeah.
I like French fry.
Yeah, that's the worst when they don't come out and play the encore. That is like kind of depressing.
Like, right? What, did we not clap long enough? Like, did we
know.
fail?
Like, what do we have to do here? Start throwing $5 bills at the stage. Like, come on, guys. Didn't make enough money at the door. What? Yeah.
Well, Lisa, it is awesome having you on the Marmalead team, and it was awesome having you on the jam with us today. We're definitely going to have you back in the future. So thank you for taking your time. Thanks for putting together the questions and the answers. It was fantastic.
Thanks for having me as both a member of the Marmalead team and as a jam guest. I have enjoyed both thoroughly. So.
Excellent.
Anyone who can't get enough Lisa, you can find her at success@marmalead.com. There's a chance you will get her responding to you directly. Or she also does onboarding webinars every Tuesday. So if you haven't been on one of those yet, check those out. And if you hit us up at success@marmalead.com, we can send you a link to sign up for those onboarding webinars.
Yep.
You won't get to see her, unfortunately, but you can hear her voice. That's almost as good. So, all right. But we will see you guys next time on Etsy Jam.